The morning sun cast long shadows across the tarmac at London Heathrow Airport as security teams conducted their final sweeps. It was a crisp Tuesday in March, and the air carried that distinct blend of jet fuel and anticipation that marked important arrivals. Today would be different from the usual diplomatic visits that regularly graced British soil. Today, the Prince and Princess of Wales would personally welcome German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier for what many considered one of the most significant state visits in recent years. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stood before her mirror in the private suite at Windsor Castle, carefully adjusting the elegant navy blue coat that had been specially selected for this occasion. The garment, designed by one of Britain's most celebrated fashion houses, struck the perfect balance between formal dignity and approachable warmth. Her stylist had chosen accessories that would photograph beautifully, but wouldn't overshadow the importance of the diplomatic moment they were about to witness. "The weather looks promising," William remarked as he entered the room, already dressed in his formal morning coat. The Prince of Wales had been briefed extensively on German protocol, though his natural diplomatic instincts and years of royal training had prepared him well for such occasions. He understood that today's reception would set the tone for President Steinmeier's entire visit to the United Kingdom. Their children had been particularly excited about the day's events, though they would not be accompanying their parents to the airport. Louis had peppered his father with questions about German customs during breakfast, while Charlotte had wanted to know if the president would arrive in a special airplane. George, now old enough to understand the significance of such diplomatic visits, had expressed curiosity about the political discussions that would take place during the president's stay. The journey to Heathrow began just after 9 o'clock, with the royal motorcade traveling through London's relatively quiet morning traffic. Catherine found herself reviewing the briefing notes one final time, though she had already memorized the key points about President Steinmeier's background and the current state of British-German relations. The president, she knew, had served as Germany's foreign minister before assuming the largely ceremonial role of head of state, bringing decades of diplomatic experience to his position. President Steinmeier's flight from Berlin had departed on schedule earlier that morning, carrying not just the German leader, but also a carefully selected delegation of officials, security personnel, and journalists who would document every aspect of this important diplomatic exchange. The aircraft, a specially configured Airbus used for German state visits, had crossed European airspace with the precision and timing that marked all such high-level diplomatic movements. As the royal motorcade approached Heathrow, Catherine could see the extensive security preparations that had been implemented for the president's arrival. Multiple rings of protection surrounded the designated arrival area, with both British and German security teams working in careful coordination. The logistics of such visits required months of planning, with every detail scrutinized and contingency plans prepared for numerous scenarios. The VIP reception area at Heathrow had been transformed for the occasion, with both British and German flags positioned strategically throughout the space. The red carpet stretched precisely from where the president's aircraft would come to rest to the covered area where the formal greetings would take place. Protocol officers had measured distances, timed movements, and rehearsed the sequence of events to ensure everything would proceed with the dignity and precision expected of such occasions. William and Catherine arrived at Heathrow with 30 minutes to spare before the president's scheduled landing time. This buffer allowed for any unexpected delays while ensuring they would be properly positioned when the aircraft touched down. The couple used these final moments to receive last-minute updates from their staff and to review the sequence of events that would unfold over the next hour. The German aircraft appeared as a distant speck against the March sky, gradually growing larger as it approached Heathrow's designated runway. Air traffic controllers had cleared the airspace around the airport, providing President Steinmeier's flight with the priority handling reserved for visiting heads of state. The precision approach and landing demonstrated the skill of the German flight crew and the careful coordination between British and German aviation authorities. Catherine watched as the aircraft taxied toward their position, noting how the morning light reflected off its polished surfaces. She had participated in dozens of such receptions since becoming Princess of Wales, but each one carried its own significance and diplomatic weight. Today's meeting would strengthen bonds between two nations that had overcome a complex historical relationship to become close allies and partners. The aircraft came to a complete stop at exactly the predetermined position, its engines gradually winding down as ground crews moved into position. The mobile stairs were wheeled into place with military precision, while security teams took their designated positions around the reception area. Every movement had been choreographed in advance, leaving nothing to chance in these carefully orchestrated diplomatic moments. President Steinmeier appeared in the aircraft doorway, pausing momentarily as was customary before beginning his descent. He was accompanied by his wife, Elke Budenbender, a respected judge who often traveled with the president on important state visits. The couple moved with the measured dignity expected of such occasions, fully aware that cameras from around the world were documenting their every step. William stepped forward as the president reached the bottom of the stairs, extending his hand in the formal greeting that would officially welcome Germany's head of state to British soil. The handshake, though lasting only seconds, carried symbolic weight that represented the positive relationship between their two countries. Catherine followed with her own warm greeting, adding the personal touch that had become her signature in diplomatic encounters. "Mr. President, Mrs. Budenbender, welcome to the United Kingdom," William said, his voice carrying clearly in the crisp morning air. The formal words were expected, but his genuine warmth made them meaningful beyond their diplomatic necessity. President Steinmeier responded in excellent English, expressing his pleasure at being welcomed by the Prince and Princess of Wales. The brief ceremony continued with the presentation of flowers to Mrs. Budenbender, a traditional gesture that Catherine performed with practiced grace. The bouquet had been carefully selected to include blooms that held significance for both Britain and Germany, a small detail that reflected the attention paid to every aspect of such diplomatic exchanges. The gesture was photographed extensively, these images destined to appear in newspapers and magazines across both countries. Local dignitaries who had gathered for the reception were then introduced to the German president and his wife. Each introduction followed precise protocol, with titles announced clearly, and handshakes timed to allow photographers adequate opportunity to capture these diplomatic moments. The Mayor of London, various members of Parliament, and representatives from the German business community in Britain all participated in this carefully choreographed welcome. The German ambassador to Britain stood nearby, having played a crucial role in organizing the visit and ensuring that every detail met the expectations of both governments. His satisfaction was evident as he watched the smooth progression of events, knowing that months of careful planning had contributed to this successful beginning of the president's state visit. As the formal greetings concluded, the party moved toward the waiting motorcade that would transport President Steinmeier and his delegation into central London. The route had been carefully planned to showcase some of Britain's most iconic landmarks while maintaining the security requirements necessary for such a high-profile visit. Traffic had been redirected along the designated path, ensuring smooth progress toward their destination. Catherine and William would accompany the German president and his wife in the lead vehicle, using this travel time to engage in the informal conversation that often proved more valuable than formal diplomatic meetings. These personal connections, built through shared experiences and mutual respect, formed the foundation of successful international relationships that extended far beyond individual visits or specific political agreements. The motorcade departed Heathrow precisely on schedule, beginning the journey that would take President Steinmeier through London's historic streets toward Buckingham Palace, where Queen Camilla would host a formal luncheon in his honor. The timing had been calculated to allow for the president's arrival at the palace with sufficient time for him to refresh himself before the next phase of his carefully planned itinerary. Traffic along the route moved smoothly, testament to the extensive coordination between multiple government agencies and local authorities. Citizens who had gathered along the designated path waved German and British flags, creating spontaneous displays of friendship that added warmth to what might otherwise have been purely formal proceedings. These public demonstrations of welcome often proved more memorable than the official ceremonies themselves. The conversation within the lead vehicle flowed naturally between English and German, with President Steinmeier demonstrating the linguistic skills that had served him well throughout his diplomatic career. Catherine's genuine interest in German culture and history, evident through her thoughtful questions, helped establish the personal rapport that would enhance all subsequent interactions during the visit. As central London's familiar landmarks came into view, President Steinmeier expressed his appreciation for the warm reception and his anticipation for the discussions that would take place over the coming days. The state visit would include meetings with government officials, business leaders, and cultural figures, providing opportunities to strengthen cooperation across multiple areas of mutual interest between Britain and Germany. The successful airport reception had set exactly the tone that both governments had hoped to achieve. Personal warmth combined with appropriate dignity, demonstrating that diplomatic relationships could be both professional and genuinely friendly. The images captured during these first moments would be transmitted around the world, showing two allied nations committed to continued cooperation and mutual respect. William reflected on how such moments, though brief, carried significance that extended far beyond their immediate participants. The personal relationships forged between leaders often proved crucial during challenging times when quick communication and mutual trust became essential for addressing international crises or opportunities. Today's warm reception would contribute to that foundation of understanding and cooperation. The motorcade continued its smooth progress through London, carrying President Steinmeier toward the next phase of a visit that would strengthen bonds between Germany and Britain, while demonstrating the enduring importance of personal diplomacy in an increasingly complex global environment. The morning's success at Heathrow had provided the perfect foundation for everything that would follow during this significant diplomatic exchange. The royal motorcade moved through London's streets with practiced efficiency, its route carefully planned to showcase the capital's most impressive architecture while maintaining the security protocols essential for such a high-profile diplomatic visit. President Steinmeier gazed out at the bustling city, noting how London had changed since his previous visits as foreign minister. The German leader had always appreciated Britain's unique blend of historical preservation and modern innovation, qualities that resonated with his own country's approach to balancing tradition with progress. Inside the lead vehicle, conversation flowed naturally between the Prince and Princess of Wales and their distinguished German guests. Catherine had prepared extensively for these informal moments, understanding that personal connections often proved more valuable than formal diplomatic exchanges. Her questions about German cultural initiatives and educational programs revealed genuine interest that President Steinmeier found refreshing in the often calculated world of international diplomacy. The relationship between our countries has evolved remarkably, President Steinmeier observed as they passed through central London. His English, polished through decades of diplomatic service, carried the slight accent that many found charming rather than obstructive. When I first visited Britain as a young official, such personal warmth between our peoples would have seemed impossible to imagine. William nodded thoughtfully, understanding the historical context that made today's friendship between Germany and Britain all the more significant. The Prince of Wales had studied European history extensively, particularly the complex relationship between the two nations throughout the 20th century. Today's visit represented not just current cooperation, but the triumph of reconciliation and mutual respect over past conflicts and misunderstandings. The motorcade approached Westminster, where the iconic towers of Parliament came into view. President Steinmeier had requested this particular route, wanting to see the heart of British democracy during his journey to Buckingham Palace. The German leader held deep respect for parliamentary traditions, having worked within Germany's own democratic system for decades. His appreciation for democratic institutions had been shaped by his country's complex political history. Crowds had gathered along the route, many waving small German and British flags that had been distributed by local community groups. These spontaneous demonstrations of friendship always moved visiting dignitaries, representing genuine public support for international cooperation rather than orchestrated political theater. Children from local schools had been given permission to leave classes to witness this historic moment, creating memories that would last their lifetimes. Catherine pointed out various landmarks as they progressed, sharing anecdotes that brought London's history to life for their guests. Her natural storytelling ability, combined with extensive knowledge gained through years of royal duties, made her an engaging guide. President Steinmeier and Mrs. Budenbender found themselves genuinely entertained by her descriptions of royal traditions and parliamentary customs that shaped British public life. The security arrangements surrounding the motorcade represented months of careful planning between British and German agencies. Motorcycle escorts cleared intersections with precision timing, while unmarked vehicles carrying additional protection agents maintained discreet positions throughout the convoy. Overhead, helicopter surveillance provided additional security coverage, though their presence was minimized to avoid creating an atmosphere of excessive militarization. As they crossed Westminster Bridge, The Thames sparkled in the morning sunlight, its waters carrying the usual mixture of tourist boats and working vessels that gave London's river its distinctive character. President Steinmeier commented on the river's importance to British history, noting parallels with Germany's own relationship with the Rhine. These geographical connections often provided common ground between nations that strengthened diplomatic bonds beyond political considerations. The German delegation traveling in following vehicles included the president's chief of staff, security detail, and a carefully selected group of officials who would participate in various meetings throughout the visit. Each had been briefed extensively on British customs and expectations, though President Steinmeier's own diplomatic experience ensured that cultural sensitivity would characterize all their interactions with British counterparts. Traffic management had been executed flawlessly, with London's notorious congestion temporarily tamed through careful coordination between multiple agencies. The smooth progress of the motorcade reflected the extensive preparation that preceded such visits, including detailed timing studies and contingency planning for various scenarios. Every traffic light had been synchronized, every intersection cleared in advance. Mrs. Budenbender engaged Catherine in conversation about educational initiatives and cultural exchanges between their countries. As a judge and academic, she brought unique perspectives to discussions about legal cooperation and judicial training programs that often received less attention than traditional diplomatic topics. These professional connections between individuals often proved as valuable as formal government agreements. The approach to Buckingham Palace revealed the extensive preparations that had been made for President Steinmeier's visit. Additional security barriers had been discreetly positioned around the palace grounds, while ceremonial guards had been stationed at strategic points. The famous red-coated sentries stood at attention, their traditional uniforms providing continuity with centuries of royal protocol while serving distinctly modern diplomatic purposes. Protocol officers had positioned themselves at key points around the palace entrance, ready to guide the German delegation through the formal arrival procedures. Each officer had studied German customs and expectations, ensuring that cultural sensitivity would characterize every aspect of the president's reception. The attention to such details often determined the success or failure of diplomatic visits. As the motorcade entered the palace gates, President Steinmeier observed the magnificent architecture that had served as the backdrop for centuries of British royal history. The building's facade, recently cleaned and restored, gleamed in the morning light. Many visiting heads of state found their first sight of Buckingham Palace emotionally moving, understanding that they were participating in traditions that connected them to generations of international diplomacy. Queen Camilla awaited their arrival in the palace's main courtyard, her presence adding royal dignity to the proceedings while demonstrating the importance Britain placed on President Steinmeier's visit. Her experience in royal duties, gained through years of supporting King Charles during his time as Prince of Wales, had prepared her well for such diplomatic responsibilities. The Queen's genuine warmth toward visiting dignitaries had become one of her most appreciated qualities. The formal presentation of President Steinmeier to Queen Camilla followed protocols established through centuries of royal tradition, yet the personal warmth evident between all participants elevated the ceremony beyond mere formality. These moments of genuine human connection often proved more memorable than elaborate state dinners or formal meetings, creating foundations for lasting diplomatic relationships. Members of the palace staff had spent weeks preparing for this visit, ensuring that every detail would meet the exacting standards expected of royal hospitality. From flower arrangements to menu planning, each element had been carefully considered and executed. The reputation of British royal entertainment had been built through such attention to detail, creating experiences that visiting dignitaries remembered for decades. The German president's personal staff coordinated seamlessly with their British counterparts, demonstrating the professional cooperation that characterized modern diplomatic relationships. Language barriers had been addressed through carefully briefed interpreters, though President Steinmeier's excellent English made translation unnecessary for most interactions. The smooth coordination between the delegations reflected months of careful preparation. Inside the palace, the German delegation was shown to their designated quarters, where they could refresh themselves before the formal luncheon that Queen Camilla would host in their honor. These private moments allowed visiting dignitaries to adjust to their new surroundings while preparing mentally for the intensive schedule of meetings and ceremonies that would follow throughout their stay. Catherine and William accompanied President Steinmeier and Mrs. Budenbender on a brief tour of the palace's state rooms, sharing stories about the building's history and its role in British royal life. These informal moments often provided opportunities for the personal connections that enhanced all subsequent diplomatic interactions. The German visitors expressed particular interest in the palace's art collection, noting pieces that reflected centuries of cultural exchange between European nations. The conversation during their palace tour touched on various topics that would feature prominently in formal meetings over the coming days. Economic cooperation between Britain and Germany, environmental challenges facing both countries, and cultural exchange programs all received attention during these relaxed discussions. Such informal exchanges often proved more productive than heavily structured formal meetings. President Steinmeier's appreciation for British cultural traditions became evident as they visited different areas of the palace. His questions about royal customs and parliamentary relationships demonstrated the intellectual curiosity that had characterized his long diplomatic career. The German leader's genuine interest in British institutions impressed his hosts, who recognized the value of such authentic engagement. The morning's successful progression from airport reception to palace arrival had established exactly the tone that both governments hoped would characterize the entire visit. Personal warmth combined with appropriate dignity had created an atmosphere conducive to productive discussions on important bilateral and international issues. The foundation had been laid for meaningful diplomatic exchanges. As the tour concluded and preparations began for the formal luncheon, both British and German participants could take satisfaction in the smooth beginning of what promised to be a significant state visit. The personal relationships being forged during these early hours would prove valuable not just during the current visit, but in future diplomatic interactions between the two nations. Security personnel from both countries maintained their vigilant watch, while remaining as unobtrusive as possible, understanding that excessive visible protection could interfere with the personal connections that made such visits successful. Their professional cooperation demonstrated the trust and coordination that characterized the broader relationship between Britain and Germany in matters of mutual security and international cooperation. The transition from public ceremonial moments to private diplomatic exchanges had been managed seamlessly, allowing President Steinmeier and his delegation to focus on the substantive discussions that would occupy much of their time in Britain. The morning's success had created momentum that would enhance all subsequent interactions during this important visit. The state dining room at Buckingham Palace had been transformed into a showcase of British royal hospitality, its magnificent table set with the finest china, crystal, and silverware from the royal collection. Queen Camilla had personally overseen the arrangements, ensuring that every detail reflected both the importance of President Steinmeier's visit and the warm relationship between Britain and Germany. The afternoon light streaming through the tall windows illuminated floral arrangements that incorporated flowers symbolic of both nations. President Steinmeier entered the dining room accompanied by Queen Camilla, their conversation already flowing naturally as they discussed shared interests in literature and historical preservation. The German president had expressed particular interest in the palace's extensive library during their earlier tour, noting parallels with Germany's own efforts to preserve historical documents and cultural artifacts. Such personal connections often proved as valuable as formal diplomatic agreements. The carefully selected guest list for the luncheon included prominent figures from both British and German communities, representing business, academia, the arts, and civil society. The German ambassador to Britain was present, along with the British ambassador to Germany, who had traveled from Berlin specifically for this occasion. Their presence ensured diplomatic continuity and professional oversight of all interactions during the president's visit. Catherine and William took their designated positions at the table, their placement calculated to facilitate meaningful conversations with various members of the German delegation. The Princess of Wales found herself seated next to Professor Klaus Müller, a distinguished historian who had spent decades studying Anglo-German cultural exchanges. Their discussion about educational partnerships between British and German universities proved both informative and engaging. The menu had been designed to reflect both British culinary traditions and nods to German cuisine, creating a dining experience that honored both cultures while maintaining the elegance expected of royal entertaining. Each course had been carefully planned, with ingredients sourced from suppliers who maintained long-standing relationships with the royal household. The attention to such details demonstrated the respect accorded to visiting heads of state. Mrs. Budenbender engaged Queen Camilla in conversation about charitable initiatives and community development programs, finding common ground in their shared commitment to social causes. Both women had used their positions to advocate for various humanitarian projects, understanding how personal influence could be leveraged for positive social impact. Their discussion touched on collaborative possibilities between British and German charitable organizations. The atmosphere in the dining room remained relaxed despite the formal setting, with conversation flowing naturally between English and German as appropriate. President Steinmeier's linguistic abilities, developed through decades of diplomatic service, allowed him to participate fully in discussions while making German-speaking guests feel comfortable. Such multilingual flexibility often enhanced diplomatic relationships by demonstrating respect for different cultural traditions. During the soup course, William engaged President Steinmeier in discussion about environmental challenges facing both countries, particularly regarding renewable energy initiatives and climate change adaptation. The German leader had long championed environmental protection, understanding that international cooperation was essential for addressing global warming and resource conservation. These conversations often led to concrete collaborative projects between nations. The service throughout the luncheon demonstrated the professionalism of the royal household staff, who had prepared extensively for this important occasion. Each course was presented with precision timing, while wines were selected to complement both the food and the diplomatic significance of the gathering. The seamless execution of such events reflected years of experience in royal entertaining and attention to detail. British business leaders present at the luncheon took advantage of opportunities to discuss trade relationships and investment opportunities with their German counterparts. These informal exchanges often proved more productive than formal business meetings, allowing for personal connections that facilitated future commercial relationships. The role of personal diplomacy in international commerce had become increasingly important in the modern global economy. Cultural figures from both countries found common ground in discussions about artistic collaborations and cultural exchange programs. The conversation touched on recent exhibitions that had featured German artists in British galleries, as well as British cultural presentations in Germany. These artistic connections often created lasting bonds between nations that transcended political changes and economic fluctuations. Academic representatives used the occasion to explore possibilities for expanded research cooperation between British and German universities. Professor Mueller outlined several historical research projects that could benefit from joint British-German scholarly collaboration, while his British counterparts described ongoing studies that would welcome German academic participation. Such intellectual exchanges often produced innovations that benefited both countries. The main course featured traditional British lamb prepared with subtle German influences, accompanied by seasonal vegetables sourced from the royal estates. The presentation was elegant yet approachable, reflecting Queen Camilla's preference for hospitality that impressed guests without intimidating them. The balance between grandeur and warmth characterized the best of royal entertaining traditions. President Steinmeier took advantage of the informal atmosphere to share stories from his diplomatic career, including memorable encounters with other world leaders and lessons learned from decades of international service. His anecdotes provided insights into the personal dimensions of global diplomacy, reminding listeners that successful international relationships often depended on individual connections and mutual understanding. The conversation gradually turned to current international challenges, including conflicts in various regions and the importance of multilateral cooperation in addressing global problems. Both British and German representatives emphasized their countries' commitment to working together within NATO, the European Union relationships, and other international organizations. These discussions reinforced the strategic partnership between the two nations. As the dessert course was served, featuring traditional British pudding with German-inspired accompaniments, the atmosphere became even more relaxed and convivial. The successful progression of the luncheon had created exactly the warm, productive environment that both governments had hoped would characterize President Steinmeier's entire visit. Personal relationships were being forged that would enhance diplomatic cooperation for years to come. Mrs. Budenbender shared her perspectives on judicial cooperation between European nations, drawing on her experience as a judge and legal academic. Her insights into legal harmonization efforts and cross-border judicial training programs interested several British legal figures present at the luncheon. These professional exchanges often led to concrete improvements in international legal cooperation. The Prince and Princess of Wales demonstrated throughout the luncheon their understanding of diplomatic protocol while maintaining the personal warmth that had become their signature in international relations. Their ability to balance formal requirements with genuine human connection impressed the German delegation and contributed significantly to the positive atmosphere pervading the entire gathering. Technology leaders from both countries discussed opportunities for collaboration in artificial intelligence research, cybersecurity initiatives, and digital innovation programs. These conversations reflected the growing importance of technological cooperation in modern diplomatic relationships, particularly as both Britain and Germany sought to maintain competitive advantages in rapidly evolving global markets. Environmental scientists present at the luncheon explored possibilities for joint research projects addressing climate change challenges specific to European conditions. Their discussion touched on renewable energy development, sustainable agriculture practices, and urban planning initiatives that could benefit from British-German collaboration. Such scientific cooperation often produced practical solutions for global environmental challenges. The wine selection throughout the luncheon included both British and German vintages, symbolically representing the partnership being celebrated while providing excellent accompaniment to each course. The sommelier had worked closely with palace protocol officers to ensure that every beverage choice reflected diplomatic sensitivity while maintaining the high standards expected of royal entertaining. As coffee was served in the adjoining reception room, smaller conversation groups formed naturally, allowing for more intimate discussions between individuals who had identified shared interests during the formal luncheon. These spontaneous connections often proved most valuable, creating networks of personal relationships that enhanced official diplomatic channels. Queen Camilla's closing remarks expressed genuine pleasure in hosting President Steinmeier and Mrs. Budenbender, emphasizing her hopes for continued cooperation between Britain and Germany across all areas of mutual interest. Her words, though brief and informal, captured the spirit of friendship and partnership that had characterized the entire gathering. The German president responded with equal warmth, expressing gratitude for the exceptional hospitality. The transition from the formal luncheon to afternoon tea provided opportunities for continued conversation in a more relaxed setting. Palace staff had prepared the blue drawing room for this purpose, creating an intimate atmosphere where smaller groups could continue discussions begun during the meal. These extended social interactions often proved crucial for cementing the personal relationships that enhanced diplomatic cooperation. Security personnel from both countries maintained their vigilant but discreet watch throughout the proceedings, their professional cooperation demonstrating the trust and coordination that characterized broader security relationships between Britain and Germany. Their presence was felt but not intrusive, allowing natural social interactions to flourish while ensuring appropriate protection for all participants. As the afternoon progressed, the success of the luncheon became increasingly evident through the animated conversations and genuine connections being forged between British and German participants. The foundation had been established for productive formal meetings that would follow later in President Steinmeier's visit, with personal relationships now in place to facilitate honest and open diplomatic exchanges. The afternoon schedule called for President Steinmeier's departure from Buckingham Palace to number 10 Downing Street, where Prime Minister would host formal political discussions about bilateral cooperation and shared international concerns. The transition from royal hospitality to governmental diplomacy marked a significant shift in the day's proceedings, though the personal relationships established during the luncheon would enhance all subsequent official interactions. Catherine and William accompanied the German president and Mrs. Budenbender to the palace courtyard, where the official motorcade waited to transport them through central London. The informal conversation during this brief walk continued themes explored during lunch, particularly regarding cultural exchange programs and educational partnerships that both couples had championed in their respective countries. The security arrangements for the journey to Downing Street had been coordinated between multiple agencies, reflecting the heightened protection required when visiting heads of state traveled through London's busy streets. Metropolitan Police motorcycle escorts took their positions around the convoy, while additional unmarked vehicles carrying protection officers integrated seamlessly into the formation. President Steinmeier expressed his appreciation for the morning's exceptional hospitality as they prepared to depart, noting how the personal warmth of his reception had exceeded even his high expectations for British diplomatic protocol. His comments reflected genuine sentiment rather than diplomatic courtesy, evidencing the success of the carefully planned welcome that had characterized his first hours in Britain. The route to Downing Street had been selected to showcase additional London landmarks, including the Houses of Parliament and Westminster Abbey, allowing President Steinmeier brief glimpses of institutions that had shaped British democracy and culture for centuries. These symbolic touchstones often resonated deeply with visiting leaders, connecting current diplomatic relationships to historical foundations of democratic governance. Traffic moved smoothly along the designated path, testament to the extensive coordination that had preceded the president's arrival. London's notorious congestion had been temporarily managed through careful planning and traffic control measures that minimized disruption to normal city activities while ensuring secure passage for the diplomatic convoy. Inside the lead vehicle, conversation touched on environmental initiatives that both Britain and Germany had pioneered, particularly regarding renewable energy development and carbon reduction targets. President Steinmeier's long-standing commitment to environmental protection aligned closely with priorities that William had championed through his various charitable and advocacy roles, creating natural common ground for continued discussion. Mrs. Budenbender and Catherine explored possibilities for expanded judicial cooperation between their countries, building on the legal academic's professional expertise and the princess's growing knowledge of international justice initiatives. These conversations often led to concrete collaborative projects that enhanced practical cooperation between nations beyond traditional diplomatic agreements. The German delegation in following vehicles included senior officials who would participate in the political discussions at Downing Street, each prepared with detailed briefings on British governmental structures and current policy priorities. Their presence ensured that President Steinmeier's formal meetings would be supported by comprehensive expertise across multiple policy areas. Crowds continued to gather along the route, many displaying German and British flags, while others simply sought glimpses of the distinguished visitors. These spontaneous demonstrations of public interest reflected genuine appreciation for international friendship and cooperation, providing encouraging evidence of popular support for diplomatic initiatives between the two nations. The approach to Downing Street revealed additional security measures that had been implemented for the president's visit, including temporary barriers and increased visible police presence. These precautions reflected both the importance accorded to President Steinmeier's visit and the general security requirements for protecting visiting heads of state in central London. Protocol officers positioned at the entrance to number 10 coordinated the president's arrival with precision timing, ensuring smooth transitions between different phases of his official schedule. Their professional expertise, developed through managing numerous such visits, contributed significantly to the seamless progression of diplomatic events throughout the day. The Prime Minister waited at the famous black door of number 10, ready to personally welcome President Steinmeier for discussions that would address both bilateral cooperation and broader international challenges facing both countries. The symbolic importance of this location, recognized worldwide as the center of British governmental power, added gravity to the diplomatic exchanges that would follow. Catherine and William took their leave of the German delegation at Downing Street. Their role in the day's official proceedings concluded, but their personal relationships with President Steinmeier and Mrs. Budenbender now established for future diplomatic interactions. The success of their airport reception and palace hospitality had set ideal conditions for productive governmental discussions. The formal handshake between Prime Minister and President outside number 10 provided photographers with a symbolic image that would represent this diplomatic visit in media coverage worldwide. Such moments, though brief, carried significant symbolic weight in international relations, demonstrating mutual respect and partnership between allied nations. Inside number 10, the German president was shown to the cabinet room, where formal discussions would address economic cooperation, security partnership, and shared approaches to international challenges. The intimate setting encouraged frank exchanges between leaders who could speak candidly about sensitive policy issues affecting both their countries and broader international relationships. Mrs. Budenbender was welcomed separately for discussions with senior British officials about judicial cooperation, legal harmonization efforts, and academic exchange programs that fell within her professional expertise. These parallel meetings often proved as valuable as headline political discussions, creating practical frameworks for enhanced cooperation between nations. The agenda for President Steinmeier's political discussions included climate change initiatives, where both Britain and Germany had demonstrated leadership in developing innovative approaches to environmental protection. Their shared commitment to renewable energy development and carbon reduction targets provided solid foundations for expanded collaborative efforts addressing global warming challenges. Economic cooperation featured prominently in the planned discussions, particularly regarding trade relationships that had evolved significantly since Britain's departure from the European Union. Both countries recognized the importance of maintaining strong commercial ties despite changed political circumstances, seeking creative solutions that benefited businesses and consumers in both nations. Security cooperation represented another crucial area for discussion, with both Britain and Germany facing similar challenges from international terrorism, cyber threats, and hybrid warfare tactics employed by hostile nations. Their intelligence agencies had developed close working relationships that enhanced protection for both countries while contributing to broader NATO and international security efforts. Cultural and educational exchanges received attention during the political discussions, building on conversations begun during the Royal Luncheon about expanded university partnerships and scholarly collaboration. Both leaders recognized that strong people-to-people connections provided essential foundations for enduring diplomatic relationships that could weather political changes in either country. The European dimension of British-German relations required careful handling, given the complexities introduced by Brexit while maintaining the strategic partnership that both countries valued. Creative diplomatic solutions were explored that honored changed political circumstances while preserving practical cooperation across multiple policy areas of mutual interest. International development cooperation offered opportunities for expanded collaboration, particularly in Africa where both Britain and Germany maintained significant aid programs and development partnerships. Coordinated approaches to humanitarian assistance and economic development in challenging regions often produced better results than unilateral national efforts. Technology cooperation emerged as an increasingly important aspect of bilateral relations, with both countries seeking to maintain competitive advantages in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and other emerging fields. Shared research initiatives and coordinated regulatory approaches could enhance innovation while addressing legitimate security concerns about technological developments. The discussions progressed through various agenda items with the informal yet substantive character that marked successful diplomatic exchanges between experienced leaders. President Steinmeier's decades of foreign policy experience meshed well with British governmental approaches that emphasized practical solutions over ideological positioning. Migration and refugee policies represented sensitive but important topics for discussion, given challenges facing both countries from population displacement caused by conflicts and economic disruption in various regions. Coordinated European approaches to these humanitarian challenges required continued cooperation between Britain and Germany despite changed institutional relationships. As the formal discussions concluded, both leaders expressed satisfaction with the productive exchanges that had addressed current challenges while identifying opportunities for enhanced cooperation across multiple policy areas. The personal relationships established throughout the day had created foundations for continued diplomatic partnership that would benefit both countries and broader international stability. The success of President Steinmeier's first day in Britain reflected careful planning, professional execution, and genuine commitment from all participants to strengthening the partnership between their nations. The combination of royal hospitality, personal diplomacy, and substantive policy discussions had created ideal conditions for meaningful diplomatic progress during the remainder of the president's visit. Evening approached as President Steinmeier's intensive first day of diplomatic activities in Britain drew toward its conclusion. The formal discussions at Downing Street had exceeded expectations, producing concrete agreements for enhanced cooperation across multiple policy areas while strengthening personal relationships between key officials from both countries. The foundation had been established for productive exchanges during the remainder of the German president's state visit. The evening program featured a reception at the German embassy in London, providing opportunities for President Steinmeier to meet with members of the substantial German community living in Britain, along with British citizens who had contributed to German-British friendship through various professional and personal connections. These grassroots diplomatic encounters often proved as valuable as high-level governmental meetings for building lasting international partnerships. Catherine and William arrived at the German embassy as guests of honor, their presence demonstrating royal support for the diplomatic initiatives that had characterized the day's proceedings. The embassy building itself, located in prestigious Belgrave Square, had been transformed for the occasion with elegant decorations that celebrated both German heritage and British hospitality in equal measure. The guest list reflected the diversity of connections between Britain and Germany, including business leaders who had invested across both markets, academics who had participated in exchange programs, artists who had shared their work internationally, and ordinary citizens whose personal relationships crossed national boundaries. These human connections formed the real foundation of international friendship beyond governmental agreements. President Steinmeier moved through the reception with genuine warmth, taking time to speak personally with individuals whose stories illustrated the positive impact of German-British cooperation. His conversations with students who had studied abroad, business owners who had expanded internationally, and families with connections to both countries provided concrete examples of successful diplomatic relationship building. Mrs. Budenbender engaged enthusiastically with British legal professionals who had worked with German courts and academic institutions, exploring possibilities for expanded judicial training programs and legal education exchanges. Her professional expertise complemented her diplomatic role, creating opportunities for practical cooperation that enhanced formal governmental agreements between the two nations. The embassy staff had prepared cultural displays highlighting historical connections between Germany and Britain, including exhibitions of art, literature, and scientific achievements that demonstrated centuries of intellectual and cultural exchange. These presentations reminded attendees that current diplomatic cooperation built upon deep historical foundations of mutual influence and shared development. Traditional German cuisine featured prominently at the reception buffet, prepared by chefs who had expertly adapted authentic recipes for international palates while maintaining their essential character. The food served as a cultural bridge, allowing British guests to experience German traditions while providing German attendees with familiar tastes that connected them to their homeland. Musical entertainment included performances by German musicians living in London, along with British artists who had studied or performed in Germany, creating a cultural program that celebrated artistic exchange between the nations. These performances often moved attendees more deeply than formal speeches, demonstrating how cultural connections transcended language barriers and political boundaries. William engaged in extensive conversations with German business leaders who had established operations in Britain, learning about challenges they faced and opportunities they had discovered in the post-Brexit economic environment. These practical discussions often provided insights that enhanced governmental understanding of commercial realities affecting diplomatic relationships between nations. Academic representatives from both countries used the reception to continue discussions begun during the royal luncheon about expanded research collaboration and student exchange programs. These conversations frequently led to concrete partnerships that enriched educational offerings while strengthening personal and professional connections between institutions across national boundaries. The German ambassador to Britain served as host for the evening, his obvious satisfaction with the day's successful diplomatic achievements evident as he moved among guests, ensuring that conversations flowed smoothly and connections were made between individuals with shared interests. His role in facilitating President Steinmeier's visit had been crucial to its success. Technology entrepreneurs from both countries found common ground in discussions about artificial intelligence development, renewable energy innovation, and digital transformation challenges facing European businesses. Their conversations often proved more productive than formal governmental meetings, leading to practical partnerships that advanced shared technological and economic objectives. Environmental activists and researchers used the reception to explore collaborative possibilities for addressing climate change challenges that required international cooperation. Both Germany and Britain had demonstrated leadership in environmental protection, creating natural opportunities for shared initiatives that could influence broader global approaches to sustainability challenges. Cultural institutions' representatives discussed possibilities for expanded exhibitions, artist exchanges, and educational programs that would enhance public understanding of German and British cultural traditions. These cultural diplomacy initiatives often proved more effective than formal political programs for building genuine public support for international cooperation. The reception atmosphere remained relaxed and convivial despite the formal setting, with conversations flowing naturally between English and German as appropriate. The multilingual character of the gathering reflected London's cosmopolitan nature, while honoring the specific German-British partnership being celebrated throughout President Steinmeier's visit. Young professionals from both countries particularly appreciated opportunities to network with peers who had studied or worked internationally, sharing experiences about cultural adaptation and professional development across national boundaries. These personal connections often lasted for decades, creating informal networks that enhanced diplomatic and commercial relationships. As the evening progressed, President Steinmeier delivered brief informal remarks expressing his gratitude for the exceptional welcome he had received throughout his first day in Britain. His words emphasized themes of friendship, cooperation, and shared commitment to democratic values that resonated deeply with attendees from both nations. The president's comments touched on environmental cooperation, acknowledging both countries' leadership roles in addressing climate change, while emphasizing the importance of international partnership for achieving meaningful progress on global challenges. His remarks reflected themes that had emerged throughout the day's various diplomatic encounters. Economic cooperation received attention in the president's remarks, with acknowledgement of the creative solutions both nations had developed for maintaining strong commercial relationships despite changed political circumstances following Brexit. His optimism about future partnership opportunities encouraged business leaders present at the reception. Cultural exchange featured prominently in President Steinmeier's comments, building on conversations throughout the day about educational partnerships, artistic collaboration, and scholarly cooperation. His emphasis on people-to-people connections resonated with attendees who had personal experience with German-British cultural exchange programs. The president concluded his remarks by expressing confidence that the relationships established and strengthened during his visit would continue growing, benefiting both nations while contributing to broader international stability and cooperation. His words captured the optimistic spirit that had characterized the entire day's diplomatic activities. Catherine and William offered their own brief remarks, expressing appreciation for German contributions to British cultural and economic life, while emphasizing royal support for continued cooperation between the two nations. Their words reinforced governmental diplomatic initiatives while adding personal warmth that enhanced the reception's convivial atmosphere. As the formal reception concluded, smaller conversation groups continued their discussions in more intimate settings throughout the embassy building. These extended social interactions often proved most valuable for cementing personal relationships that would enhance diplomatic cooperation long after President Steinmeier's visit concluded. The evening's success provided a fitting conclusion to an exceptionally productive first day of diplomatic activities that had exceeded expectations for both British and German participants. The combination of formal governmental discussions, royal hospitality, and grassroots community engagement had created ideal conditions for meaningful diplomatic progress. Security personnel from both countries had maintained vigilant but discreet protection throughout all day's events, their professional cooperation demonstrating the trust and coordination that characterized broader security relationships between Britain and Germany. Their presence enabled natural social interactions while ensuring appropriate protection for all participants. As President Steinmeier and Mrs. Budenbender departed the embassy for their hotel, both could take satisfaction in a day that had strengthened German-British relations across multiple dimensions. The personal relationships established would enhance future diplomatic cooperation, while the practical agreements reached would benefit citizens of both nations. The success of the day's activities reflected months of careful planning by diplomatic professionals from both countries, whose attention to detail and cultural sensitivity had created opportunities for meaningful exchange and cooperation. Their behind-the-scenes work had enabled the formal diplomatic achievements that would be remembered as President Steinmeier's lasting contribution to German-British partnership. Looking ahead to the remaining days of the state visit, participants could anticipate continued productive exchanges that would build upon the strong foundation established during these crucial first 24 hours in Britain. The president's visit had begun with exceptional success, creating momentum for diplomatic achievements that would benefit both nations for years to come.